to a virtual audience on Zoom and across social media, so a warm welcome to everyone joining us online. Please note that the event is being recorded and a recording will be archived on our YouTube after the event. It has been 13 years since the Great East Japan earthquake struck Japan's Tōhoku region on March 11th. The most powerful ever recorded in Japan's history, the earthquake triggered a catastrophic tsunami, causing immense loss of life, destruction, and widespread displacement. This evening, we are honored to have two guests who were on the front lines of the rescue and recovery operations that followed. Here in London, we're joined by Chiba Yoshihiro, captain of the Ōfunato City Fire Brigade in Iwate Prefecture, an area that was severely damaged by the earthquake and tsunami. Chiba-san will share his first-hand experiences of the emergency response and recovery operations in Tōhoku. Joining us remotely is Sean Moore, former national coordinator for the UK International Search and Rescue Team. Sean played a key role in the international relief efforts in the aftermath of the disaster, and he will share his experiences and provide his perspective on the international dimension of disaster recovery. Following their presentations, we'll be joined by Robin Jenkins, founder and CEO of Atlantic Pacific International Rescue, an organization born out of the 2011 disaster with bases in Japan and the UK. Atlantic Pacific is dedicated to combating global drowning through search and rescue, education, and community outreach. Robin will join the speakers to discuss the challenges and successes of international disaster recovery, the lessons learned from 2011, and recent efforts to improve disaster preparedness. We will then open the floor to questions. For those joining us online on Zoom, you're also welcome to submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A function. Our first speaker will be Chiba Yoshihiro, who will be speaking in Japanese with interpretation by Lynn Nishitani from the Atlantic Pacific team. Please join me in welcoming Chiba-san.
皆さんこんばんは。日本の大船渡から来ました千葉義弘と申します。
Good evening. My name is Yoshihiro Chiba from Ōfunato, Japan.
日本はロンドンから飛行機で14時間かかります。
Japan is about 14 hours by plane from London.
私の住んでいる大船渡は日本の北東の沿岸に位置して、首都の東京から8時間、車で8時間、東京と北海道の間にあります。
And Ōfunato, where I live, is located on the northeast coast of Japan, 8 hours by car from the capital, Tokyo, and it is located between Tokyo and Hokkaido.
海と山が近くて、海産物も多く、自然豊かな場所です。
And the landscape is by the sea, and it's got seafood.
花も多く、日本原産の椿も自生しています。
And there are wild camellia flowers.
人口は3万2000人。
The town has a population of 32,000.
1万4000世帯が住んでおり、地形は海からもすぐ山となり、平地はほんの少しで、砂浜もありますが、海水浴場もあります。
And there are 14,000 households, and the landscape is immediately mountainous from the sea with only a few flat areas. And there are sandy beaches, but there are also areas of sheer cliffs.
リアス式海岸といって、断崖絶壁の場所もあり、緑豊かで国立指定公園としても指定されています。
And there are areas of sheer cliffs known as the Rias Coast, which has been designated as a national memorial park.
私の仕事は消防士で、今年で32年目を迎えます。
My job is a firefighter, and this year marks my 32nd year.
本日は今から13年前、2011年3月11日に日本で起きた災害を私が経験したことをもとにお話しします。
Today, I would like to talk about my experiences during the disaster that occurred in Japan 13 years ago on the 11th of March 2011.
災害時の対応、 そこからの復興、そして学んだ教訓などを話していきたいと思っておりますので、よろしくお願いいたします。
And I will talk about my response to the disaster, recovery from it, and lessons learned.
私が消防士となった頃、30年ほど前ですが、30年以上前は、大船渡では 70% 以上の確率で大きな地震、津波が来ると言われていました。
When I became a firefighter, Ōfunato City was told that there was more than a 70% chance of a huge earthquake and tsunami within 30 years.
消防士の成り立ての私は、私の現役中に30年以内に 70% という確率ということは、必ず大きな災害が来ると思っておりました。
As a new firefighter, I had always thought that a 70% probability or higher within 30 years meant that a major disaster might occur during my time as a firefighter.
そしてまさに2011年3月11日の2時46分にマグニチュード 9.0 の地震があり、その津波により多くの建物と命が失われました。
And that is exactly what happened at 2:46 p.m. on the 11th of March 2011, when an earthquake of magnitude 9.0 and tsunami destroyed many buildings and lives.
地震で倒れた建物もありましたが、津波で多くのものが流され、津波で残ったのはコンクリート製の建物だけでした。
There were many buildings collapsed and many buildings were swept away, and only the concrete buildings remained.
これは1960年の写真です。
This is a photo from 1960.
昔の写真なので白黒です。
As it is an old photo, it is not in color.
日本は地震や津波が多い国で、1960年、1933年、1896年にも地震や津波で多くの命を失っています。
Japan is a country with many earthquakes and tsunamis, and many lives were lost in earthquakes and tsunamis in 1960, 1933, and 1896.
建物は崩れ、道路には水の跡も見られます。
And many buildings collapsed, and you can see the water line in the photo.
津波の跡です。
It's the line of tsunami.
そしてこの写真は2011年の私の市内の写真です。
And this photo is from the Ōfunato City in 2011.
写真はカラーですが、災害状況は先ほどの白黒と同じです。
The photo is in color, but the disaster situation is the same as the black and white color one we saw earlier.
そしてこの写真は津波が到達して止まった市街地の時計の写真です。
And this is a clock in the city center where the tsunami arrived and stopped.
午後3時25分を指しています。
And it is at 3:25 p.m.
この場所には地震が起きて約40分後に津波が到達しています。
The tsunami reached this location after about 40 minutes.
沿岸部にはもっと早く到達していたかもしれません。
The tsunamis arrived much earlier in the coastal areas.
地震のあった震災当日は私は仕事中だったため、地震発生後すぐに状況把握とその把握できた状況で救助活動、消火活動に当たりました。
On the day of the earthquake, I was on duty, so as soon as the earthquake hit, I immediately assessed the situation and then engaged in rescuing and firefighting activities that we were able to assess.
地震発生後にはライフラインがすべて止まり、電話、電気、水道などは使えませんでした。
Immediately after the earthquake, all lifelines such as telephones, electricity, and water supply were cut off.
状況把握は無線と、目視のみでした。
And the only way to assess the situation was by radio and visually.
地震の揺れの大きさと把握できた状況から、地元の私たちでは対応できる災害ではないということがすぐに分かりました。
The magnitude of the earthquake and the situation we were able to assess made it immediately clear that it was not a disaster that we as locals could handle alone.
道路なども損壊して車が走れる状況ではありません。
Roads were damaged and it was not possible to drive cars.
日本では1995年1月17日に大きな地震災害を経験しており、
Japan had experienced a major earthquake on the 17th of January 1995.
その教訓から大きな災害が発生した場合には、要請によって日本全国から被災地に救助活動を支援するシステムがあります。
And based on the lessons learned from the disaster, a system have been set up to support rescue operations in the affected areas from all over Japan on request in the event of a major disaster.
まさに2011年がその規模の災害であったため、すぐ要請をいたしました。
As 2011 was a disaster of exactly that scale, a request was made immediately.
要請は私たちの町から県へ、県で対応できない規模の災害であれば、県から国へ応援要請をします。
Requests are made from the local city level to the prefectural level, and if the scale of the situation is too large for the prefecture to cope with, the prefecture makes a request to the national level.
国では日本国で対応できない場合は、海外に支援に来てくれる国へ救助要請をします。
And in the national level, Fire Disaster Management Agency assesses whether Japan can respond to the situation alone. And if not, the national government requests international rescue teams that are willing to come to support the rescue operations.
世界の国では、インターナショナルの活動をしている国では、他の国で大きな災害があった場合には、すぐ救助活動に行く準備をしています。
Countries that are involved in international rescue are prepared to go to help if another country has a major disaster.
私の国でも、他の国で大災害があった場合には、救助隊、医療チームを派遣する準備もしています。
And Japan also has a system in place to send rescue teams and medical teams if there's a major disaster in other countries.
今回の災害では、日本では対応が難しかったため、海外の救助隊を受け入れて救助活動を行いました。
In 2011 disaster, it was difficult for Japan to respond to the disaster by itself, so we had rescue teams from abroad to carry out rescue operations.
要請した救助隊が来るまで、地元の消防士だけで対応していましたが、数が少ないため、すべてを救助できたわけではありません。
Until the requested rescue teams arrived, we responded with a few local firefighters, but we were not able to rescue all of them.
私たちは災害の大きさに対し、どう対応していけばいいか分からず、迷いながら助けられる命を懸命に救助していました。
We were unsure how we can respond to this scale of the disaster, but we tried our best to rescue the lives that could be saved.
しかし災害に遭った次の日には、日本の災害に遭わなかった地域から救助隊が到着し、さらに2日後にはイギリス、アメリカ、中国、民間では台湾とオランダからの救助隊が駆けつけてくれました。
However, the next day, rescue teams arrived from other areas of Japan that were not affected by the disaster. And 2 days later, rescue teams from the UK, US, China, and privately from Taiwan and the Netherlands arrived.
この写真は私の町へイギリスの救助隊がヘリコプターで到着し、宿営地に私が案内するときに撮影した写真です。
This photo was taken when the British rescue team arrived by helicopter in my town, and I guided them to the accommodation.
言葉も通じませんでしたが、彼らは私に心配をしてくれました。
Although we didn't speak the same language, they were worried about us.
その時同時に彼らが到着したことによって災害に立ち向かう心強さを感じました。
Thanks to their sympathy, I felt reassured that we were ready to face the disaster together.
日本まで来ていただきありがとうございます。
I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all.
この場をお借りして皆さんに感謝の気持ちを申し上げたいと思います。
Thank you very much for coming to Japan for the rescue operation.
彼らは救助隊員のほかに救助資機材と必要と思われるものをすべて日本に持ってきて一緒に救助活動を行ってくれました。
They brought everything they thought they would need, including people, rescue equipment, and materials, and worked with us to rescue people.
災害には72時間という時間のキーワードがあります。
Disasters have a key time frame of 72 hours.
72時間以内であれば生存確率は高いですが、72時間を過ぎると生存確率は一気に低くなります。
Within 72 hours, the chances of survival are high, but after that time, they become much lower.
しかし災害の状況によって気象状況や規模によって時間は変化します。
However, the rescue probability also changes depending on the disaster and weather conditions.
救助活動は助けられる命をいち早く救助するために災害の大きい地域から救助活動を行います。
Rescue operations start from the areas where the situation is the worst in order to save the lives that needs to be saved as quickly as possible.
一人でも多くの命を救うためです。
The aim of the rescue is to save as many lives as possible.
写真の地図のようにそれぞれに捜索の場所を割り当て効率よく救助活動を行います。
Search and rescue operations are carried out efficiently by allocating each search and rescue operation to a map like the one in the picture.
捜索救助が終われば左上のように終了したというマークを書きます。
When a search and rescue is completed, we put a mark to indicate that it is finished.
このような災害現場では活動にはあらゆる危険なものがあります。
In such site, there are all kinds of hazards.
一日の活動が終了すれば夜に集まって活動結果と次の日の活動内容を話し合います。
At the end of the activities for the day, they discussed the results of the activities and the next day's activities in the evening.
彼らとの活動は長い救助活動を行い、生存確率も低くなったため、活動は終了しました。
After a long rescue operation with a very low probability of survival, the first stage of the rescue operation was over.
第一段階の救助は終了です。
So that was the end of the first stage of their rescue.
彼らは救助活動を終了し移動しましたが、私たちに励ましの言葉をかけてくれました。
When the first stage of rescue operation finished, they gave us words of encouragement to us.
言葉も通じず、名前も分かりませんが、隊員たちの心はつながっていました。
We could not communicate with them and did not even know their names, but they shared the same passion.
その後も私たちは諦めず、救助活動を行いました。
Even after the first stage of rescue, we did not give up and carried out rescue operations.
1週間が過ぎた頃には、このように黙祷を行っています。
After a week of rescue operations, we had a moment of silence for those who had died.
長い救助活動でした。
It was a very long rescue operation.
現在、日本ではその災害では15,900人の方が亡くなっています。
Nationwide, 15,900 people had died.
行方不明者は未だに2520人です。
And still 2,520 people are missing.
私は震災前から日本国内で救助災害に対応するために救助訓練を行っていました。
Before the earthquake, I had been training to respond to disasters in Japan.
いずれ来る災害のためです。
This was to prepare for disasters that would eventually come.
2010年には3月にはアメリカのサンフランシスコのタスクフォース3で救助トレーニングに行きました。
In March 2010, I went to San Francisco in US for rescue training with Task Force 3 for rescue training for major disasters.
大きな災害の救助活動の訓練をするためです。
It was for a training in preparation for major disasters.
そこでは基礎的なこと、そして技術を学びました。
I learned a lot of things there, from the basics to techniques.
実は2011年3月12日から2度目のトレーニングに行くはずでした。
I had actually planned to go to San Francisco for a second training session on 12 March 2011 after my duty on the day.
仕事を終了したらアメリカのサンフランシスコに行く予定でした。
After my duty on the day, I was planning to fly to San Francisco.
しかし、フライトの1日前に震災があり、トレーニングに行くことはできませんでした。
However, one day before the flight, the earthquake and tsunami hit, and I could not go to the training.
トレーニングではなく、実際の災害対応となりました。
Instead of a training, we delivered an actual disaster response.
そして逆に海外の救助隊が来てくれました。
Then, on the contrary, rescue teams from other countries came to Japan.
前の年に見た資機材、そして隊員などすべてのものを持って来てくれました。
And they brought all the materials that we had seen in the training in San Francisco the year before.
前の年に見ていたため、彼らの望むだろうと思われる被災地の人口や地図情報などを私は彼らが救助隊として来る前に準備しました。
And we prepared information about the population and maps of the affected area, which we thought they would want before they came to help us rescue.
そして彼らと一緒に救助活動を行いました。
Then we engaged in the rescue operations together.
2011年に行けなかったトレーニングのため、2012年と2014年にも同じサンフランシスコに訓練に行っています。
We trained in San Francisco in 2012 and 2014 to continue the rescue training that we could not do in 2011.
災害発生から自宅にはほとんど帰れず、救助活動を行っていましたが、10日ほど経って救助活動も縮小されたため、私は近くの家の周りを見て回ることをしました。
After the disaster, I could hardly go back to my home, but after about 10 days, rescue operations were scaled down and I was able to go back to my home. So I went around to see what was going on around my house.
私の自宅は海から離れていたため、一部の壊れたところだけで済みましたし、家族も無事でした。
The area around my home was far from the sea, so the buildings had only collapsed a little, and all my family members were safe.
その時もライフラインは止まったままです。
Lifelines were still down at that time.
そして近くの大きな集会所を見に行くと、多くの人が避難して暮らしていました。
And many people had evacuated and were living in a large assembly hall nearby.
災害から5年経った後、2016年、私はロサンゼルスの行われた追悼式に参加してきました。
In 2016, 5 years after the disaster, I attended a memorial event in Los Angeles in US.
そこで大船渡に来た救助隊員と再会しました。
There, I met with those who came to Ōfunato during the disaster.
その当時は名前も分からず一緒に活動しましたが、再会して彼は被災した状況のその後の復興状況はどうかとかいろいろ聞かれました。
I did not know his name at the time of the disaster, but when I met him again, he asked me about the situation and recovery afterwards.
私は来てくれてありがとうと伝えました。
I expressed my gratitude.
その震災当時の彼の写真です。
This is a photo of him in Ōfunato at the time of the disaster.
言葉は通じませんが、心は通じ合っていました。
Again, we didn't speak the same language, but we shared our hearts and passion.
今も連絡を取り合っていて、災害の話や今後起こりうる話、そして家族やプライベートの話をしてつながっています。
We still keep in touch and talk about the disaster, possible future stories, as well as family and personal life.
2019年には東京オリンピックの関係でロサンゼルスのジャパンハウスでこのような話をしました。
In 2019, I gave a talk about the disaster at Japan House in Los Angeles in relation to the Tokyo Olympics.
その時もロサンゼルスの隊員と交流しています。
We also had an opportunity to interact with the firefighters there.
2011年以降も日本では大きな災害が起こっています。
There have been many major disasters in Japan since 2011.
2016年には熊本地震。
In 2016, there was the Kumamoto earthquake.
今年の2024年1月には能登半島地震が起こっています。
This year, in January 2024, the Noto Peninsula disaster occurred.
どちらの災害も私は行きましたが、ライフラインも含めいろいろ問題があり、必要なものはいつも同じです。
I was there for both disasters, and although there are many problems, including lifelines, the needs are always the same.
例えばトイレですが、水が出なくなった時にはどうしますか？
For example, toilets, what do you do when the water stops running?
水が流れない場合はパッキングして捨てればいいと思いますが、パッキングの方法は皆さん知っていますか？
You can pack the toilet and throw it away, but do you know how to pack it?
皆さんが知らない場合には不衛生となり、その後病気に発生するかもしれません。
If you don't know how to use it, it will be unhygienic and you may subsequently develop disease.
もっともっと知っておかなければならないこともありますが、いっぱいいろいろあります。
There is much more to it than that, and there's a lot more that you need to know.
そのために私の町では防災教育として過去の災害の話や災害時の必要なものを展示したり、そこで学び、教え、その後の災害の対応に対してどう行うかという防災教育を行っています。
Therefore, in my town, as part of disaster prevention education, we talk about past experiences, and we also display items that are necessary in case of disaster so that people can learn, think, and then respond to future disasters.
13年が経ちますが、復興はまだまだ続いており、おそらく元通りには戻りません。
13 years have passed since the disaster, but reconstruction is still in progress and things are not back to normal yet.
人口も毎年減少していて、震災前よりも2割減少しています。
The population is also decreasing every year. The population has decreased by 20% from before the disaster.
そのため逆に以前よりより良いものにしようと行政は計画実行中ですが、まだまだ先は長いです。
Therefore, the government is planning and implementing plans to reverse the situations and make it better than before, but we still have a long way to go.
これから復興を考えて、その未来のことも考えていかなければなりません。
We need to think about future disaster response.
その考えは大きく4つあります。
There are four main things to consider for future disaster and disaster recovery.
この写真は2011年と16年と現在の写真です。
This picture shows at the time of disaster, 5 years after, and now.
先ほど4つと言いましたが、1つ目は災害に遭った地域の整備です。
The first of the four is the development of disaster-affected areas.
今回の災害では地震と大きな津波によって被害を受けました。
In the 2011 disaster, the earthquake and the tsunami caused a major damage.
そのため居住する場所と商業施設を災害の状況を考えた区画をすることです。
Therefore, residential areas and commercial facilities should be demarcated in consideration of the disaster situation.
例えば津波の到着する地域には居住を建てない。その地域には商業施設を作って津波に耐えられる建物とし、避難の第一避難場所としての建物と利用することができるようにするということ。
For example, people should not live in areas where tsunamis will reach, but on higher ground. And if commercial facilities are built, they should be built to withstand tsunamis and be used as temporary emergency evacuation facilities.
しかし災害前にそこに住んでいた人の心情を考えると、高台への移転または整備を考えるとそう簡単にはいかないかもしれません。
However, it may be difficult considering the sentiments and voices of people who resided in the area before the earthquake.
2つ目は少子高齢化によることや若者の流出による人口の減少についてです。
The second is about population decline due to the falling birth rate and aging population and outflow of young people.
私の市は漁業が中心なため、気候変動によって漁獲量の減少によって後継者が不足しております。
My town is mainly engaged in the fishing industry due to its coastal location.
そこで少ない水産物の品質の管理を徹底してブランド化、販売ルートを確立と拡大をするということです。
And there's a slump in fish catches, which also led to a lack of successors. Therefore, as a solution, we engage in branding of the scarce fishery products with thorough quality control and the establishment and expansion of sales routes.
また新たな商業の開発、そして観光拡大、雇用拡大をして魅力を発信していかなければなりません。
The development of new commercial activities, the expansion of employment, and the development of tourist attractions are also important.
3つ目として防災としてのまちづくりです。
The third is town development as disaster prevention.
安心して暮らせるためにそのまちづくりとして過去にどのような災害が起こったのかを知ること。
In order to build a town where people can live with peace of mind, it's important to first understand what kind of disasters had occurred in the past.
そしてそのような災害にどう対応すればいいかということを考えること。
And think about how to respond to such disasters.
必要なものを備えるということが大切です。
And to prepare the necessary items.
備えるものとしては、災害に必要なものや災害に対応できる建物ということもありますが、まずは一人一人がその時どう行動すればいいかということを知ることが必要です。
The necessary items include items needed in the event of a disaster and buildings that can cope with a disaster. But first of all, each individual must know how to behave in such a situation.
過去を学ぶこと、伝えること、体験してもらうこと、そして備えてもらうことが必要です。
This is why education is important, which includes learning about the past, communicating, experiencing, and preparing for it.
それが防災教育です。
This is disaster prevention education.
4つ目として暮らしてみたいと思える魅力を上げるための行政サービスです。
The fourth is the government services to make the city more attractive to live in.
すべてにおいて住んでいる人が日々の生活が楽しくて、訪れる人が楽しい、満足できるものとしなければなりません。
In order to make the city more attractive, to make the city an attractive place to live and enjoy daily life, residents and visitors must be satisfied with all aspects of the city.
それにはソフト面とハード面の整備が必要不可欠です。
It is essential to develop the town from both soft and hard aspects.
今まで4つのことを挙げましたが、ここから細かいことを考えると、整備していかなければならないことがたくさんあります。
I have just listed 4 major areas, but from here we have to consider the details, which is why it will still take a long time to rebuild.
そのため復興にはまだまだ長い時間がかかります。
It's a long way to go.
そしてもう一つ、災害は同じものが来るとは思われず、地球の温暖化に伴い災害の変化もしてきます。
Another thing is that disasters are not expected to be the same, and with global warming, disasters are also changing.
近年、地球温暖化に伴って日本でも豪雨や洪水、土砂災害が頻発しており、今まで災害を経験したことのない地域でも災害が発生しています。
In recent years, heavy rains, floods, and landslides have become more frequent in Japan as a result of global warming, even in areas that have never experienced such disasters before.
これからは過去から学ぶことも必要ですが、未来を予想するということも必要不可欠になってくると思います。
In the future, it will be important to learn from the past, but I think it will also be essential to predict the future.
今回私はイギリスに救助について、来ましたが、とても環境問題について考えさせられました。
My visit to the UK was to learn about rescue, but it made me think a lot about environmental issues.
住んでいる地域だけではなく、地球規模で伝えていけなければならないことがあるのではないかと考えました。
I hope that we can think about these issues not only locally, but also on a global scale.
そして今日、皆さんの前でこのようなお話ができたことを本当に感謝しています。
I am very grateful to have met you all and to be able to speak in front of you today.
そして今日皆さんとこうやってお会いできて嬉しいです。
I am very happy.
これは私の町の今年のお祭りの花火大会の写真です。
This is a picture from the festival that I had in Ōfunato.
やっとこういうふうな花火大会ができるようになりました。
We were able to hold this festival.
私の地域は海も近いため、花火のほかに水上からも花火を上げます。
We live by the sea, so we put fireworks from the boats on water.
皆さんも機会があれば、ぜひ私の町へ来てください。
If you have a chance to go to Japan, please come to Ōfunato.
ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Chiba-san. Now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Sean Moore. Former National Coordinator for the UK International Search and Rescue Team, Sean will reflect on his experiences responding to the earthquake and tsunami in 2011 as part of the international relief efforts. So we are joined by Sean remotely from Italy on Zoom. Can you hear us?
I can, Julianne, thank you.
Yes, fantastic. So I'll just, yes, I'll hand over to you then. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, thank you. And just hello to everybody, and apologies I can't be with you in person tonight. And also just to say thank you to Mr. Yoshihiro for his presentation, which for me brought back many memories. I knew a lot of the faces on the photographs, some of whom are no longer with us. So thank you for those experiences. And if you can just bear with me 1 second, I'm going to share my screen to hopefully put my presentation on. Can you somebody just confirm you can see the screen, please? Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do just for the next 10 minutes is just give you a very quick overview of the UK International Search and Rescue Team that deployed to Japan 13 years ago, even though the memories are still very fresh in my mind. I'll talk very briefly about our preparation, the deployment process, and I'll just share some very quick reflections of my own experiences and some of my thoughts on the response itself. So the UK ISAR capability, we are a declared heavy rescue team under the International Search and Rescue Advisory Group. And what that means, it's a global standard, and teams from all across the world are classified to an international standard. And with that, the real benefit is that countries that request assistance know the type of team that's going to arrive to assist. We're able to deploy via ground or via air, even to the other sides of the world. And we've deployed many times since our inception in 1991. We're fully self-sufficient, well, mostly self-sufficient, because when we fly, we don't actually bring transport with us. And that's one of the challenges that we always have when we land in another country. We bring 14 tons of equipment. We're able to deploy very quickly. Within 6 hours is our standard time to fly literally anywhere in the world. Once we get there, we're able to operate around the clock, 24-hour operations on 2 different working sites. And again, bringing a lot of expertise into those sites in order to rescue people. One important thing is we always operate under the host nation coordination structure, whatever that is. So we're always working for the hosting government, the hosting local authorities. In terms of our preparation, very, very similar to Mr. Yoshihiro and the team there. Training is paramount to us. We have full-time firefighters that are also technical rescue experts, and they undertake a continuous training and exercising program. And we very much focus on the response to earthquake and flood-related disasters, although we can respond to virtually any disaster that comes our way. In terms of equipment, I mentioned it's 14 tons. We have technical search, listening, and search cameras, heavy cutting tools. We're able to cut through reinforced concrete, steel, glass, and any other kind of building material. We have breaching, cutting. We're able to move, lift heavy concrete slabs. We're also able to stabilize buildings before we enter, and we also provide a medical provision as well. In terms of people, we deployed with 77 people, and these for a whole range of different skill sets, from technical rescue, logistics, medical. We deploy with 4 search and rescue dogs, and I'll talk briefly about those. Structural engineers, hazardous material, environmental protection officers, and then we have like a detailed command support infrastructure so that we can communicate literally anywhere in the world. So that's the preparation. as I said, is paramount because we consider the UK ISR team as being one of the best in the world. And we are one of the best in the world because of the support that we get from all of the different fire and rescue services that supply the people, from the UK government that supply the finance. And I think the most important thing is the enthusiasm and professionalism of the team members that we select and deploy overseas. Coming back to the earthquake, just a short story on this. We were actually with, or I was actually with, the Secretary of State from the UK, from Department for International Development. We had literally 2 weeks previously deployed to Christchurch in New Zealand to assist with the earthquake there. And I had been home for just over a week, and we met with the Secretary of State. He wanted to thank us for our efforts. Somebody came, we were actually on a local fire station, and somebody came in and said there's been a huge earthquake in Japan, and there's also a tsunami. Well, we actually went into the fire station, switched on the TV, and we were watching the events unfold live. Now, the Secretary of State turned around to me and said, are we able to deploy? And I immediately said, of course we are, sir. But what I didn't tell him was that all of our equipment was still on its way back from New Zealand. He literally got onto the phone, and he, in terms of diplomatic channels, offered support to the Japanese government, which was accepted, which put us in a real predicament because we then literally had to pull out all of the stops to resupply our team. We went all over the UK and managed to get tents, radio communication, all of the equipment required for us to deploy overseas. And again, I think it's testament to the processes that we've got that really rapid decisions are able to be made at governmental level to ensure that we can get onto the ground as quickly as possible. And I think, as Mr. Yoshihiro mentioned, you've got the most opportunity to save lives within the first 72 hours following an earthquake. So it's really paramount that we're able to get into the air as quick as possible. I think you've seen this picture. I just wanted to briefly mention coordination. And when we eventually got onto the ground, things were apocalyptic is how I'd describe the scene. But we very quickly established liaison with the local authorities in Ōfunato. And we were given an area to search, and we worked with the 2 teams from the USA, from Virginia and California, and also a team from China. So we did a very quick and dirty sectorization, and it was as quick as that, and we got to work on the ground. Just a couple of words on challenges during the deployment. Transportation, I mentioned previously, but we were able to fly into a US Air Force base. They supplied us with transport to unload all of our equipment from the plane and get us to the scene of operations. But it was a real challenge, navigating through areas that had been completely devastated both by the earthquake and the tsunami. Working alongside Japanese authorities, local responders, trying to communicate in different languages. Of course, it creates an issue, a situation. It slows down communication, which can impact on the decision-making process. But we were given a translation team, young students from universities, and they were absolutely fantastic. And they worked really closely with us so that we were able to communicate. The weather caused us, again, some real issues. It was really cold, snowy conditions that had an impact on us. Because I'll be honest, we weren't expecting it to be quite so cold. whilst we were there, and we had some issues which were overcome. And then I think the real challenge was just the sheer level of destruction that we actually witnessed, and I'll show you some of our pictures of those. Just some reflections, really, and these are kind of my personal reflections, and I actually think that even though there was a huge loss of life, I think the long-standing culture of preparedness significantly reduced that loss of life. What we also saw was the readiness of all of the rescue teams, the Japanese rescue teams on the ground, and indeed the citizens involved in helping each other. And I think that preparedness program really did reduce the overall loss of life, because as Mr. Yoshihiro said, they were expecting this and they were very well prepared for it. But just given the huge size, the scale, the enormity of the disasters, one unfolding after another, it really was, I don't think any preparedness program in the world would have been able to mitigate the effects and the impacts of it. Again, I think the quick actions of the local authorities, the community groups, was really testament to the preparedness programs and other things that have been put in place. And I really think there is no country in the world that would have been able to manage the situation. And I think the really quick decision to recognise that the initial assessment teams did a really good job recognising that they could not cope, and of course asked for national support, but then also the international support as well. One of the things that was really evident to us was, the dealing with the local communities, dealing with the local responders. We recognised that was, a real deep-rooted culture, a culture of responsibility, patience, mutual respect. We've been to earthquakes in other parts of the world where it was absolute chaos, and I can't actually describe to you the difference that we saw in Japan. And again, that's just testament to the people and the resilience of the people as well that we met. I'm just going to quickly share some pictures with you and just try and talk you through what I'm seeing here and what we saw on the ground. You can see the devastation that was caused, and we, as I said, have been to lots of really big international disasters, but this was different. In an earthquake, what we get is collapsed buildings, collapsed structures, and you're able to really sectorize those. But what we saw here was everything that was mixed up together. Okay, we've got some of the buildings that were still standing, but most of the buildings were just gone completely. I mentioned the weather and the really snowy conditions. They slowed us down. They hindered what we were doing. They made it extremely dangerous trying to search for people in these conditions. This is where our search and rescue dogs really came into their own, because they were able to work, able to get in and amongst the rubble, really not overly impacted by the snowy conditions. Again, just a close-up of the level of destruction, what the scene was like trying to operate in these, and completely different to what we'd experienced previously. Now, unfortunately, a lot of what we were able to do was to recover bodies, that were deeply entrapped in this kind of rubble and destruction. And it was a lesson I'd learned previously from Christchurch just a few weeks, the importance of actually recovering the victims of the disaster and repatriating them back to the families so that they could have, a dignified burial. So we spent a lot of time, and we really did whatever kind of scene we were in, we really did spend the time to get really under the rubble that we were seeing in order to, as I said, to recover the victims and make sure that there was nobody else trapped that was alive. Just another scene from inside of a factory. Again, we experienced a lot of hazardous materials, and one of the things that really I remember are the fish. The fish were everywhere, and we thought that the fish had come in from the sea, but then, of course, we realised that Ōfunato was a fishing port, and there was a fishing market that put these fish everywhere. It was just really, it's an experience that's still in my mind, even 13 years afterwards. So very quickly, in summary, I think the response in 2011 was, it demonstrated really exceptional preparedness, but also the challenges that any country would face when you are trying to manage multifaceted disasters, as in, you know, an earthquake, a tsunami, and a radioactive incident all at the same time. I think my overriding memory is the ability of the Japanese people to remain calm and work together, even when people had literally lost everything, including their family members and the roof over their heads. And we were extremely proud to have offered our support and to assist in any way that we could. And just the final picture here really sums it up for me. We were there to do rescues. We were there to do body recoveries, but we assisted in any way that we could. And the story of this lady who had literally lost everything, we just seen her in the street, and the boxes that you see were her possessions. That is what she had left in life. And the person that you can see, the second individual that you can see there, is now actually one of the most senior fire officers in the UK, Roy Wilshire. And again, he was with us on that deployment, and again assisted whichever way he could. So I'll bring it to a halt there. Apologies, it's really quick, but hopefully it's given you a very quick overview of just some of the sites that we saw. But of course, what you don't get from the pictures are the sounds, the smells, and everything else that we experienced. So thank you very much for listening, and I will hand back to Julianne.
Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to a short question and answer session, which will be moderated by Robin Jenkins, who is the founder and CEO of Atlantic Pacific International Rescue. So I'd like to welcome Chiba-san back again. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for coming this evening and hearing these incredible stories about what took place on that extremely shocking day. Briefly, the reason why we're here as our organization, Atlantic Pacific, was born as a result of our experience of the situation, which happened 3 years after the event, when visiting Northeast Japan and seeing that the recovery was still ongoing, and as has been mentioned, still is. And we felt we could assist in a way. We're a group of people that have a background in sea search and rescue. In the United Kingdom, we are fortunate enough to have the RNLI, which is this year 200 years old, has 240 lifeboat stations, and is operated 365 days a year. In Japan, there is no such thing. And we felt, with our background knowledge of being lifeboat crew and being involved with designing lifeboats, that we could assist. And so we decided to establish a station in the city of Kamaishi, which is just north of Ōfunato. And during that time, and once we actually placed the lifeboat station there in 2016, we did our first training course, and that is where I met Chiba-san. And we have been friends ever since, and building that project even further. And it's not been an easy project. It's been a very difficult project, but what has powered it and empowered it and kept us moving on is the resilience of the people that we have worked with and the people that we have just listened to. I think for me, in this short presentation of what went on in that time, was this underlying sense of resilience and this unwillingness to give in. We experienced that in Japan in a major way, and the people that we met in this devastated community were first very welcoming, very generous, very open, very damaged. And we could see the journey is a long-term journey. So what we've seen here is some of the practical or the physical impacts, but there are long-term damages. We are very proud as an organization that we, in a very small way, are part of that recovery, and our resilience comes from their words and what they've gone through. Is Sean still with us, or has Sean had to go? Is Sean still with us?
Yep, Robin, I'm still here. Yep.
You're still here. I'm very aware that you need to go and have some supper. So I'm gonna start with you first of all, Sean, and then we'll open it up to the floor. For you, I think you've made very clearly in the conversation and the presentation that you've just given there, but maybe if you could potentially highlight some of the really, really significant challenges that you experienced there, and how you might, in approaching a similar situation in the future, might take learnings from those significant challenges and implement new procedures or a change to the way in which you did things.
Yes. So I did mention some of the challenges, and again, I think some of them you just can't do anything about. When you do travel to the other side of the world, you do get communication challenges, especially in earthquakes. It's not just a language thing. The communication frameworks go down, the structures go down. So we have got to be able to communicate. It's absolutely key in what we do to be able to communicate with back home, with the local authorities, with other teams, and with our own team indeed as well. So lessons we've learned is to be literally fully self-sufficient in terms of the different types of communications that we need. Again, I think one of the biggest challenges is logistical complexities when you deploy overseas. I mentioned being self-sufficient, and we absolutely try to be as self-sufficient as possible, but we're always relying on some degree of host nation support when we arrive in countries. And host nation support, I can remember back to Haiti, it was absolutely zero. The earthquake there, and conversely, going to Christchurch, it was almost like a platinum standard. So I think for teams that are kind of disaster prone, having a host nation support framework already established really will speed up the response of the international teams that are coming in to support the disaster. And that's certainly something that we've learned in Europe. We have implemented host nation support guidelines all across the European states for exactly this reason, so that we can move teams very, very quickly from one country to another, because we have a set of standards, a set of guidelines, and we also test and exercise that. So, and it's the same for every single disaster that you go to. There will be logistical challenges and complexities. I think one of the other challenges that wasn't mentioned for us and for me personally was the psychological stress that we were being put under. And of course, when you go to these types of disasters, you experience things that other people will never ever experience in their life, and of course we train and we prepare to be able to respond to that. But for this particular one, we were under real pressure because of the environment we were working in, but this overarching radiological situation as well. We were having to do continuous updates back to the UK, not only to our government, but also to our loved ones as well, because they were so worried about us being exposed to this radioactive cloud. And it really made the challenge of keeping the team together and keeping everybody well informed of the situation, and the fact that, you know, I can remember writing our risk assessment at the time, and our risk assessment was that if the radiological situation had have got worse and moved towards us, we were actually going to be evacuated by US helicopters and put onto US ships that were alongside. And I've still got a copy of that risk assessment somewhere, and that's probably something I will never have again. So without going into too much of the detail, those are the kinds of challenges that I remember. You know, of course, there's 100 other challenges of keeping people safe, keeping your team safe, looking after the welfare of your team, but also absolutely providing the best level of service and support that we can to the disaster affected countries that we're going to.
I mean, that's fascinating. I think one of the things that often when you see something like this occurring, and when you do see a horrific disaster like the disaster that took place on 2011, the search and rescue individuals that you potentially see on the television and stuff, you don't really think about them. They're just sort of operatives in a way. And the sort of life stories or the emotions of those people are not really considered by the public, I guess. I mean, it may be in the after fact. And I think hearing your point there about the sort of psychological preparedness for a situation like that, moving forward, do you think that there's enough work being done to kind of to handle that situation, psychological first aid?
Yeah, I think there is. Certainly for the UK team, we've recognised it because we have had instances in the past where we've had some of our team members that have really suffered badly with the experiences. And again, I can share lots of stories, but, you know, probably too graphic for tonight. But it's well recognised. We take with us, some of our doctors are trained in, you know, critical incident diffusion. When we get back to the UK, everybody has to go through a critical diffusion process. But of course, we're all different, and we all handle these situations in different ways. We're all exposed to different parts of the disaster. And, you know, I can share a story with you with my own self. And again, it comes from Christchurch, where I was meeting families of people that were still trapped in a building that we were working on each evening. And they were sharing stories about those individuals. And then when we got to the bodies, I knew exactly who they were just by the clothes they were wearing, the top of wedding ring, the top of a handbag that was alongside. And I never realized it at the time, but it had a real psychological impact on me many months later when I got back and reflected upon, you know, the kind of experience that I'd had. And but, you know, we try to be as professional as we can about this. But as I said, we all have different breaking strains, let's call it that. And it's well recognised, and we do the best that we can to support all of the team members that deploy overseas.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a similar question to Chiba-san about the preparedness element and how had the Japan firefighting force what after the situation, what things do you think moving forward need to be improved or what needs to be implemented if this kind of situation happens again?
まずはその災害に対して先ほども言いました通り、どう対応したらいいかということを一人一人が考えていくこと、そして必要なものを備えておくことが必要です。
It's important that each individual knows how to respond to such a situation and to have everything prepared.
しかし環境も変わってきて、今までのその場で起きてた災害とまた違う災害も出てきています。
But the environment has been changing, and because of the changing environment, the disasters we might have in the future are also different from the ones we had before.
その地域で起きないと思われる災害のことも知っておくことが必要。
So it's really important that you know all the information about the disasters, even if the area had never experienced such disasters.
私が今回こちらのイギリスに来て地震が少ないということを知りました。
I came to the UK and learned that UK doesn't have many earthquakes.
逆にどのような災害があるかというのが私の心配なところです。私の心配なところ。
So he's worried what kind of disasters UK has.
こちらの災害をよくわからないからです。
Because I don't know what kind of disasters are here
も
that
し
UK has.
もし皆さんが日本に来た場合には先ほどのような災害に遭うかもしれません。
And if you come to Japan, you might experience such disaster, earthquake.
だから災害の種類とかいろいろなものを知っていくことが必要です。
That's why it's important to know all different kinds of disasters that might occur.
でも日本は安全です。津波から逃げろという矢印があります。
But Japan is safe. There's an arrow that you can follow in terms of tsunami.
Yeah, it was we've been with Chiba and his colleagues for the last week training, and a lot of the questions they're asking are about where are your arrows? If there's an earthquake, we don't have earthquakes here, and so the landscape is very different. Should we open to the floor?
Time schedule, but I think we'll have time for maybe 2 quick questions.
Okay.
Perhaps.
I have someone's right there. I'm going to give you a microphone.
Yes, we'll bring a microphone over. So.
Oh, you've got one, sorry.
There we go.
Our viewers online need to hear through the microphone.
私はマーティン・バローです。ようこそジャパン親善大使。I'm Martin Barrow. I'm a Visit Japan ambassador helping promote Japan as a tourism destination. And I know Tōhoku very well, been all over the place. Indeed, I promised to Ushiburi Chichi in Fukushima, I will never come to Japan without going up there. So I've been working a lot on it. But I was also here in the UK on the Cabinet Office Committee related to collaboration on disaster management, a group called Emergency Preparedness and Response in the Cabinet Office, and I used to represent business with others in that group. In fact, 4 months before the tsunami in Japan, this is a resilience magazine, and an article of mine was published. So the need for coming together, working closely together, the elimination of the silo mentality. In Japanese, it's called tatawari gyosei. And it's been a huge challenge in Japan, but actually, as you've all shown today, there has been good collaboration. So that's very encouraging that there is that kind of collaboration. So we need to do more working together, and we can learn things from, Japan puts out some very good little disaster preparedness handbook, and little pocket things, lots of things that we can work together on. So I hope this visit will lead to more collaboration together, and I shall be very happy to help with that in any way we can, because it's critical that we all work together in these situations. So we need an English phrase that I came up with during COVID was the need to get to tech. You think tech means technology. Tech means teamwork, engagement, collaboration, and harmony. So let's all work together. And if anybody here would like a copy of my talk here, let me know afterwards and I'll send you copies. Thank you.
One last quick question. Yes, we'll bring the microphone over to you at the back. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful talk today. To my understanding, the extreme weather events actually affecting the, all these disasters coming. And then for the Tōhoku Taishinsai in 2011, and it's mainly tsunami. And the tsunami actually affecting the nuclear power plants. And so other what do you expect to ensure the safety and the of these nuclear power plants in Japan in future, especially nuclear power plants is near the coastal area for the cooling reasons, and then the like extreme weather leading to the global warming. Global warming have the rising sea level. Right, so it will affect the nuclear power plant more. So how do you resolve these safety issues?
環境と気候、環境問題、環境の気象変動によって、雨が多く降ったり、降ることによって地盤が緩んで、土砂災害が起きたり、川が洪水が起きたり、そういった災害は今後も起きてくると思います。ただその地域に今あるものをどう安全にするかというのは、一人で考えるのではなくて、皆さんと一緒に考えて提案していけたらなと思います。
So with extreme weathers, there will be more heavy rains, landslides, and so instead of thinking about a solution for nuclear power plant by yourself, it's important that you collaborate with other people and come up with a solution. So it's a collaboration. That's it.
Well, one of the interesting things you can now go back to Fukushima. The exclusion zone has shrunk. Whenever we are in Japan, we drive from Tokyo to Kamaishi. And originally we couldn't go through Fukushima, and we've been able to get closer and closer, and now the actual highway has opened there. And a lot of scientific evidence suggests now that the problem with that nuclear power station, actually it was extremely well built and very well contained. And most of the actions that took place then were very much precautionary. And of course there were problems, but I think it demonstrated in a way that well-built nuclear power stations are maybe something that we should consider a little bit more, because they are a lot cleaner. But it definitely is something that I think has opened the eyes to manufacturers of nuclear power station. There is a big one in the UK being built at the moment opposite where we are in Wales, called Hinkley Point. And as a result of Fukushima, they built the walls a little bit thicker. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's sadly all we have time for the formal part of the event. but Chiba-san and the Atlantic Pacific team, I believe, will be staying a little bit longer in the hall. So for those of you who are watching in person, and there might be an opportunity to ask any remaining questions then. But before we end, I hope you can join me once again in giving a big round of applause to our speaker, Chiba Yoshihiro. And also to Sean Muir. And a big thank you also to Robin Jenkins and all the team at Atlantic Pacific International Rescue, including Kate Sedwell and our wonderful interpreter, Lynn Nishitani. Thank you. If you'd like to revisit today's talk, a recording of the event will be archived on Japan House London's YouTube platform. And following today's event, we'll send out a short feedback form by email, and we'd be very grateful if you could fill this in with your comments to help us improve and all these sorts of events in the future. That's all for tonight, but once again, thank you to our wonderful speakers and thank you all for attending. Thank you.